Political violence is violence which is perpetrated in order to achieve political goals. It can include violence which is used by a state against other states, or it can describe violence which is used against other non-state actors. Non-action on the part of a government can also be characterized as a form of political violence, such as refusing to alleviate famine or otherwise denying resources to politically identifiable groups within their territory, due to the imbalances of power which exist between state and non-state actors. Political violence often takes the form of asymmetric warfare where neither side is able to directly assault the other, instead relying on tactics such as terrorism and guerrilla warfare. And it can often include attacks on civilian or otherwise non-combatant targets that are perceived as proxies for the opposing faction. Many groups and individuals believe that their political systems will never respond to their demands, and they thus believe that violence is not only justified but also necessary in order to achieve their political objectives. Similarly, many governments around the world believe that they need to use violence in order to intimidate their populaces into acquiescence. At other times, governments use force in order to defend their countries from outside invasions or other threats of force and coerce other governments or conquer territory. Political violence varies widely in form, severity, and practice. In political science, a common organizing framework is to consider the types of violence which are used by the relevant actors. Violence between non-state actors. One-sided violence which is perpetrated by a state actor against civilians. And violence between states. Fighting between non-state actors without state security forces playing a direct role in the conflict. An ethnic conflict is fought between ethnic groups. While at times a specific ethnic group may have the backing of the state, ethnic conflict can also take place between two groups without the direct intervention of the state, or despite the state's attempts to mediate between groups. Terrorism can be directed by non-state actors against political targets other than the state, because terrorism is a tactic often used by the weaker side of a conflict. It may also fall under violence between a state and non-state actor. While there lacks a concrete definition of terrorism, the United States Department of Defense, however, defines terrorism as the calculated use of unlawful violence or threat of unlawful violence to inculcate fear, intended to coerce or to intimidate governments or societies in the pursuit of goals that are generally political, religious, or ideological. What is and is not considered terrorism is itself a controversial political question, as states have often used the label of terrorism to exclusively demonize the actions of their enemies while obscuring legal violence administered by the state. The use of force by an organized armed group, be it a government or a non-state group, which results in the deaths of civilians, is considered one-sided. According to the Human Security Report Project, a campaign of one-sided violence is recorded whenever violence against civilians committed by one group results in at least 25 reported deaths in a calendar year. One form of political violence is genocide. Genocide is commonly defined as the deliberate and systematic destruction, in whole or in part, of an ethnic, racial, religious, or national group, although what constitutes enough of a part to qualify as genocide has been subject to much debate. By legal scholars, genocide is typically carried out with either the overt or covert support of the governments of those countries where genocidal activities take place. The Holocaust is the most cited historical example of genocide. Torture is the act of inflicting severe pain as a means of punishment, revenge, forcing information or confession, or simply as an act of cruelty. Torture is prohibited under international law and the domestic laws of most countries in the 21st century. It is considered a human rights violation and is declared unacceptable by Article 5 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights. Signatories of the Third Geneva Convention and Fourth Geneva Convention have officially agreed not to torture prisoners in armed conflicts. National and international legal prohibitions on torture derive from a consensus that torture and similar ill treatment are immoral, as well as impractical. Despite international conventions, Torture cases continue to arise, such as the 2004 Abu Ghraib torture and prisoner abuse scandal, committed by military police personnel of the United States Army. Organizations such as Amnesty International and the International Rehabilitation Council for Torture Victims monitor abuses of human rights and reports widespread violations of human torture by states in many regions of the world. Amnesty International estimates the